Welcome to the Recovering Through Grief Chronicles. My name is Annie Blue, and today's date is October 13th, 2023. This podcast is for entertainment and education purposes only. My wondrous guest today is Allan Staple, aka Woo Woo Daddy, Captain Al, Firewalker, and master creator of resilience and resourcefulness. Allan has had the opportunity to wear many awesome hats in his life: yacht captain, ski instructor, fly fishing guide, investor, and farmer, just to name a few. So many know him as husband, father, and friend. He has a deep passion for crypto and a wonderful appreciation for life. He lives with his wife, Elizabeth, on their farm in California. He and his son, Brent, are known as the Staple Crew, actively involved through both YouTube and Patreon in their passion to share their knowledge of blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, and the solutions that these tools offer. As you will hopefully witness during this interview, Allan's approach to living life mentors us in choices we have at hand to restore our sense of connection with the beautiful web of life as well as each other. When the definition of self, supported by the doorways that grief opens for us, changes, the meaning of self-interest and self-serving motivation changes accordingly. The soul journey within the doorways of grief can be seen as an alchemical process of transmutation, transforming the lower negative forces back into spiritual light. The book Active Hope by Joanna Macy describes the approach Allan so beautifully demonstrates as work that reconnects. She states that by helping ourselves and each other restore our inner connection and outer community, the work that reconnects strengthens our capacity to face disturbing information and respond with unexpected resilience. Amidst our deep suffering, experienced in times of grief and loss, the creation of the impossible can arise as trauma has the capacity to alchemize into a gift. My guest today has for many decades now been living his life in the present moment, not in the future, not in the past, but in the present moment. Ironically, this beauty way is the future birth of process, commonly referred to as emergence. Per the book Active Hope, part of the successful implementation of emergence is by reducing our incoming data flow, the incessant mind chatter that keeps us from residing and responding from our beautiful heart space. Each one of our personal episodes with grief becomes another dress rehearsal towards residing in emergence daily. With living in emergence, living in the present moment, attunement catalyzes as we connect with, tune into, and truly hear our body, most especially our hearts. Thinking is not needed for us to assess our body terminology as we witness our primary bodily self-messaging and self-regulating system that is always there. Thank you for being here today, Allan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Annie.
Oh, I'm grateful. So if you can, what is your earliest memory of grief in your life?
Well, gosh, that's one that I honestly have to say I had to struggle with. It's, I suppose, it was when I was a young boy. I was in second grade, and I remember being bullied a lot. And I don't know that that's necessarily the same emotion as grief, but I really didn't care much for it at all. And it was something that came about because something so profound had happened to me in my life. And it was such a neat event. And it's really made me who I am today. And as you get older, you realize that, those things that happen to you when you're young really reflect later in your life as to who you become as a man or a woman later. So I'm going to tell a story that actually is the reason why everybody bullied me. And essentially, I was a Navy brat. I grew up son of a military naval man. He was my stepfather. And we were 5 kids. We were meant to go overseas. And I went into the base to have a series of vaccinations for travel. And on my way back home, in the back seat, back then in those days, we all sort of bounced around. There weren't car seats, and my mom was smoking a Marlboro and flying down. I'm telling you, this is 1966, 1967. So back in the day, and there was 5 kids in the back. Well, I had essentially passed out. Well, of 5 kids, and one of them is asleep. They're like, well, I wish the other 4 were, So nobody, nobody was really kind of too concerned about Allan or his condition. But by the time we got home, which is about a half-hour drive, I was limp and essentially dead, according to my brothers and sisters. And she had called the military base where we got the vaccinations and said, we'll check his temperature. And it was off the charts. And I had a very, very faint pulse. And so they were like, well, throw him in a bathtub and call an ambulance. And the bathtub was for ice. And they covered me in ice. And that's when I had what I would call a near-death experience. And it was not like many that I've heard or other people talk about. It was very simple for me, but it was what I would call a dream. And I received this dream, which was like I didn't rise above the room and look down upon my body. That never really occurred for me. But I saw my brothers and sisters running to all the other houses to grab ice trays, ice cubes. Back in the day, we used to have these aluminum trays with a handle that would pop them open, and everybody had them in their freezer. So I remember that I could even tell you the houses that they knocked on, they went to. And I only kind of know that because later in the story, I'll tell you why I knew that. But so they coated me in ice and water to bring my temperature down before the ambulance could get there. And it was odd to me because I only remember like a tent around me. And for some reason, even still to this day, I love tents. But that tent around me was this knowing of this well-being, and it was sort of warmth of like a glowing yellow light is about all I could call it, that was just well-being coming into me. Well, my mother freaked out crying and lost her mind. And, before the ambulance could get there, I had, right when the ambulance got there, actually, now that I remember, but they came and they said, well, there's nothing we can do, basically, was what they said. He's done. Wow. We're not sure exactly what to do at this point. This is way back when. And they were like, okay, all right. And they're talking to my mom. And I just remember waking up at that moment and looking at everybody. And they were looking at me and this look of like, what just happened there? And I was like, looking at everybody like, I feel great. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even remember getting sick. You got to remember, I'm just a boy. Wow. So I was like, put my clothes back on. This is embarrassing in front of everybody, nude in front of so it was really profound because it wasn't it wasn't necessarily anything that happened to me. It's what happened to everybody around me.
Cool.
As you can imagine.
Right.
My parents and my brothers and sisters treated me differently, essentially from that day forward. And I never really got it. I never was the guy who was like, well, why are they treating me? Because when you're a young boy, you think everybody lives that life, and all of us believe that, right? We think our
For sure.
life is like, we think like everybody else, but we really, as you get older, you understand that everybody has a different thought process and belief in life. So that was really a profound event. But for me, I was up and riding my bike an hour later. So I didn't know the difference. It was like not meaningful to me. But I do, from that day forward, there was probably about a year, I'm trying to recollect, about a year, almost two, that I didn't speak much.
Wow.
I didn't talk to people, and I daydreamed a lot. And when I say a lot, that's about all I did. We had an expression back in the day, was a space case. I was a space case. I literally, nobody could reach me. I was out there, and I was happy. I was a really happy kid. Been happy ever since, to be honest. But all I wanted to do was be in nature by myself.
Wow.
And I wanted to be in the garden, or I wanted to be out in the field. And I didn't want to be with my friends. I just wanted to kind of be with myself. And that took its toll in school, because, I couldn't keep up with study. I didn't care to listen to what the teacher had to say or any of it. And I blanked out as far as like caring about what anybody was thinking about. And so my desk went from the back of the class to literally in a closet.
Oh, in a closet? They put you in a closet?
I put myself in the closet, as I recall, but and all I would do is doodle. And I became a bit of an artist, and I was threw myself into my doodling and my art. And I can remember thinking, I can hear them, but I can't hear what they're saying for a very long time. So that, you can imagine, after the teachers were freaked out, and they kept coming to my mom and saying, well, he's just not learning anything. And we're worried about that he might have some mental issues. And, back then they really,
oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I can remember them testing me constantly.
Wow.
Like with tests. Yeah. It was really kind of, I didn't know any different. I was like, oh, okay, I'll take your test. And they would take me like to the principal's office, and they were trying to decide whether or not I should go to school in the short bus, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
They really thought I had just done some damage, like to my mind or whatever it was. And I remember all the kids, that's where the bullying came from. So at that point, the adults in the room understood what I'd gone through, and my brothers and sisters used to really defend me. They're quite a bit older than me, so they weren't really in my age group. But the adults understood what I was going through, and the teachers really would just kind of leave me alone. And I didn't say a lot, and I thought, and that's really all I did was think. And what I know now is I just got in tune, and I would receive it. And I was receiving what now, to my knowledge today, was, what I would call universal downloads, that, all is well, and peace and harmony is really what the message of universe is coming to us all. And I never really got emotional after that. It's weird. I was a guy who I didn't necessarily fear death or people who died. So grief from that point forward was really never an issue. Like, it's so weird. My son and my wife are always like, well, you don't grieve anything. You seem really happy or pleasant with the world, and you seem to be okay in it. And So, and it really led to a lifetime of, I don't have any enemies. I don't, I've never really been a guy to hate. And I don't even hate the bullies, because it was funny how life works, right? Like, I became in my introvert, they held me back a grade, as you might imagine they would do anyway. But, and then we moved overseas, and I went to a school to where I really started to excel physically. So I became a successful athlete in many ways. And that really conquered a lot. That opened a lot of doors for me. So I wasn't so much of an introvert, but that allowed me to be the bully, right?
Yeah.
I can remember saying to myself, I'm never going to be that guy. I'm wiser than that. I can't be that. I remember what it was like to be that.
Right.
To be abused by my peers, if you will. Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a much different experience, I suppose, with grief than most. But,
well, I mean, I think each and every person's experiences, because I would call them many experiences, because I consider grief a portal and doorway, are all unique. But it's really neat because it's another vantage point to understand grief from. I mean, the picture that I got, as you were saying, it was just really getting to be on the other side of the veil most of the time.
Yeah.
If you've heard the term veil. Yeah, so interesting. Well, I was so curious, because you'd kind of shared this with me, but I hadn't gotten it to the depth of it. And it's actually pretty fascinating, because I had never looked at my one brother that had a lot of trouble, and they put him in something called special school district. And he had gone through a death experience when he was 8 months old. And that never has even dawned on me to consider that it was related to something like what you experienced. And he's very happy-go-lucky. So, I mean, he's definitely he's had a harder time functioning in the world. But
it also led to I'm a bit of a visionary, but I'm not what I would call a psychic individual, although many of them have come in and out of my life. But I remember saying profound things to my mother, who was, she was more excited about cocktail hour than she was about for kids,
that age group.
Like I said, there's a big gap between the older ones. So I was there's a massive gap between my brother and I have 8 years, I believe it is.
Wow. Yeah.
I had told her about a child in between that she had lost. And she says, whoa, come in here. And she brought me in her room, in her bedroom. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I tried to be born before. I'm actually not 7 years old. I'm actually, whatever I said at the time, 12. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I tried to come to this planet, or something along those lines. And she's like, I never, ever want you to speak of this again. Who told you this? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know who told me that. I just feel like I was supposed to be born before. She had a miscarriage. She carried it full birth.
Wow.
I had no way of knowing that. And my older brother and sisters never spoke of it and never told me about it. And I started asking a bunch of questions to them about it. And they're like, how would you know anything about any of that stuff? And it was so they started to see me in a different light. But it was one of those kids things back then.
Right. Right.
It's a lot more accepted today.
Oh, for sure.
A lot more. And it really changed a lot about the way my brothers and sisters looked at me and whatnot. Happy-go-lucky is the way they put my life. Yeah.
That's so funny, because that's how I was always described, as the happy-go-lucky one too. That's interesting.
It's a good way to live.
I
Yeah,
know it is.
it
It is.
really is.
It's just so easy to find to retrace back and reframe back to that optimistic reality that there's a bigger picture to everything that's unfolding. So
That's right.
other than, I mean, and that's actually a pretty good story you just shared. Have you ever witnessed anyone else close to you that's died?
Yes, but like I say, I don't know whether it was just a knowing or an understanding that I had at an early age, which later became my teachings. That are stories that we can tell later. But in high school, a football player in our huddle, the guy that stood next to me in the huddle was played next to me, died in a car accident. Was hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, you would have thought that would have been a lot. I remember a lot of people around me being very moved by it. And I can just remember thinking to myself as a very young man, I think I was, in high school, freshman in high school, whatever it was, and being like okay with it. Like it was okay because I knew he was okay. I've always had that sense in me. And, but yeah, it was tragic. I mean, today they would never let kids do what they let us do that day. We actually were pallbearers at his funeral and played a football game like 2 hours later,
Wow.
and they were trying to figure out why we all were so upset and got kicked out of the game for fighting. I thought, what were you people thinking, allowing, high school kids to go through something like that?
The show will go on no matter what. The show will go on. Those traditions, it's just like your mother's ritual to have her cocktail hour. Yeah.
It was very emotional. I remember everybody in our school, you can imagine how kids at that age were so emotional about it. And don't get me wrong, but he and I weren't, I had just transferred to that school, so I didn't grow up with him to the level that most of the people did. So I didn't know him like forever, like a brother. So.
Well, it's interesting though, because from a bigger picture, it's neat to actually look at, why the placing of you next to him in the huddle and the importance of that on a bigger picture level with all that you've had gone through leading up to that it's almost like, just having a guardian guide, next to yourself when you choose to leave this earth plane and you pass over like that, even in a horrible accident that's a sporting one. But yeah, so it's neat to look at just the juxtaposition of you being right next to him and all that you'd endured to lead up to that from a bigger picture. That's cool. It
was a unique, at such a time of growth in all of our lives, that age group. And it was an experience that when you reflect back on, it's all those steps that we take to grow, spiritually, and who we are, we become. And it was so interesting to me because I never looked at death this equally as a lot of people around me. And I could never explain it. I couldn't justify it because everybody on the planet really despises death. And that's the norm. And if you don't think that way, you're just wrong,
Right. And a dogma.
And and I never felt that way about death. And it never made logical sense to me at all. It doesn't make sense to me still to this day that, we celebrate birth, but we don't celebrate death. Mm-hmm. It's just a passing. It's just a moving along. I did get to take a neat class called Reclaiming Wisdom, which teaches a lot about that, the whole process and where some people actually are open, with just blankets and their favorite music that they pick and food and people celebrate for 3 days afterwards. So there is a more of a sustainable grassroots movement out there that is offering something like that. So it, like you said, everything's so completely different now. Back when we had a student die when I was in 6th grade, and Charles Kuralt came in from 60 Minutes. Wow. And did a whole documentary on us. And then he said, this is 16 in this location. And they showed us at this funeral.
That's how they described. They took everything. They did like 6 weeks
Yeah.
of footage and just cut it and spliced it into the most horrific, horrible portrayal of all of us. But that's how they started, by showing us that we were 16 in this location and we were all at somebody's funeral. I mean, you can imagine the looks on everybody's faces. It was just, it was. So it's interesting, because it's interesting to get to, you're like bringing up stuff for me that it's just interesting to see, you know, the different ages and stages when we are born into, and how absolutely things play out according to the traditions and of
it
everybody.
really solidifies you too. I don't know if you experienced this. My son did. Isn't it interesting, Brent? My son went through a similar experience, and that was, he went to a very small school, and up in the mountains at a ski resort we lived in. And I think his graduating class was, 30 kids or something like that.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, neat experience for him. And one of them got cancer and passed. And I remember the graduation, and ever since, that group of those 30 people are closer than ever because of the experience that they went through with this young boy. I won't use his name, but it solidified them because they experienced this tragic, if you want to call it that, grief that they went through. And it's been so profound for him in his life. And I know it's why he is so close to all of his old classmates.
That's very cool. It's a cool outcome of a tragedy like that. As we'll go through this interview, we're going to talk about that, how people come together in that type of depth of tragedy, and you see such beautiful characteristics that bloom forward. So Rebecca Solnit is an activist and author of 17 books, and she states, an emergency is separation from the familiar, a sudden emergence into a new atmosphere, one, as we're just talking about now, that often demands we ourselves rise to the occasion. The book Active Hope asks, when you become aware of an emergency and rise to the occasion, have you noticed that something gets turned on in you? You activate your sense of purpose and discover strengths you did not comprehend you had. Practicing active hope can step us into a state of aliveness that transforms our lives and our worlds. So within your comfort level, Allan, can you share an instance in which, I mean, you've really kind of already touched on this in the stories that you've shared so far, but where this also occurred for you and how you rose to the occasion? I mean, it can even be breakups of relationships. It's anything that you found a different part of yourself that stepped in.
Yeah, because that's so true in all our lives, really, isn't it? All those events that are, what a perfect way to put that. The sudden break from normality, if you will. What a neat way to put that. I have to say, that's one of the things that that happens a lot in my life. As many people listening to this know, I'm a boat captain. I'm a yacht captain. So those events seem to happen every time we leave the dock. Wow. It's just like, well, we didn't expect that, so many times I could reflect. I don't want to make too many long stories out of this, but there are many stories of tragedy that could have gone had calmer minds not, been in place. Panic is one of those things I see a lot, and fear in people a lot. When people are in an uncomfortable situation and they don't have control of that situation, I being a ski instructor many years ago as well, I will get back to the captain angle, but I can remember I loved teaching kids because kids didn't have fear. Mm-hmm. Kids, in particular, the younger ones. Kids develop fear through listening to adults. Right. Tell them of all the things that could happen wrong. But kids, what I love about teaching them is they felt the terrain. underneath their feet. And
Yes.
they reacted to that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't use their mind, right? So in particular, when kids got about 11, 12 years old, they would start thinking what could go wrong.
Mm.
And then they didn't excel or advance as quickly because of that. Their mind got in the way of the situation. So experiencing that at that level, and then events happening on the ocean that we can't control, a couple of really bad incidents that I've been through. Thankfully, I've never been on a boat that caught fire, knock on wood, or sank. But I've been in situations where it truly could have happened.
Wow.
Had calmer minds not taken control of the situation. Both when I was a captain and when I was just a crew member, learning from captains, we all knew that the person that freaked out was our biggest liability.
Yes. Oh, good. That's so wise. Yeah.
Yeah. And you learn that really quickly. And then you realize that the best thing you can do when something really quick and out of the blue happens to you is to take a deep breath, step back, and think about what you're not thinking about, because everybody's thinking about the same thing, which is the tragedy that occurred. And I know it takes decades to come to that degree, but and if I could put it now in a relationship term, there are so many times when we're given information about a mate or a friend or whatever, and all of a sudden everything that you thought was normal and your life was perfect is now not. Those are the most challenging. Because you've lived a life or in what you found out to be possibly a lie, and somebody's been deceiving you. And then now you have to go through that whole recording of your previous year or whatever it's been. And then you don't have that advantage, if you will, of that sudden reaction of something, or what we created or kept a catastrophe from occurring. No, now you're going to have to live the rest of your life being a divorcee or whatever it may be. And those are so much a different ballgame. That is something where introspective and appreciation for who you are and how big the world is and how you can grow from these negative experiences come into play. And it's so hard to, when you're in the moment.
Yes.
There's nobody's going to tell you anything. Like you're done.
No. You're trying to stay above water. I remember asking my attorney when I went through a divorce, I said, can I say no? I said, does anybody ever say no, that they can't do a divorce? Because this is the father of our children. And I don't want anybody else that's the father. I want this person that chose to step up to the plate and father. Of course, the attorney just laughed. But
yeah. I went through that exact situation where I wanted to be the father of my son.
Yeah.
And through mistakes of my own and hers, it didn't work out that way. He was my best friend.
Oh.
My son was my best friend, is my best friend. Today,
so did you have to live? Did you end up living in a different location, or were you at least in the same city?
Yeah.
No, you probably had to travel out on the water.
Well, yeah. Well, remember those small little ski resort, right? You have to understand, I lived there for over a decade, and I knew everybody. There's 2,500 people in this town.
Oh, I've been to those.
Yeah. They knew us. They knew me. They knew.
Wow. So you lost more than a wife and the family member. You lost the whole world then.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct. And it was it's odd how you look back on it now and you say to yourself, why did we even let that occur? What were we thinking? But we had been married quite a while, and we just grew apart. But in the moment, I can remember being a weekend dad and absolutely thinking that was the worst experience I'd ever had. I just said, no, that's just horrible. I can't do that. I can't watch.
Yes.
I really couldn't watch another man raise my son.
Oh,
and I was, and he's a brilliant man.
Right. They are, but
yes,
it's still that prioritizing of that person that's your dearest and nearest.
I was his ski coach, his little league coach. I mean, I was, a great little story, and he probably loved me telling this. I did a thing with my son every night, you read him to bit of sleep or whatever it is, that we all do. And at the end of it, I would say, okay, I would answer, we'd call it questions. And I'd say, you can ask me anything in the whole world and I'll answer it. And I never lied to him. I never sugarcoat, oh, well, he's too young to know that. No, I said, whatever question you have, I will answer it to the best of my knowledge. We did that every night before we went to bed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did he talk about missing that ritual then when he didn't have it?
Sure. Yeah. And then I ran off to be a yacht captain. So I left the small little town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Talk about taking a big step that's almost too wide for your foot to reach, right?
Yeah.
That definitely fits that. In assessing your current reality, what do you find yourself turning away from because it causes harm and is detrimental to your overall well-being? And within that question, has grief played a part and fostered your desire to make this choice with all you have gleaned through your grief dress rehearsals? And if you want me to reread that, I can.
No, I got that one. That one's easy for me.
Good.
Going through that situation, and I was never a drinker really in my whole life. I never really became much of a drinker, and I started drinking right when she and I became divorced. Okay, and that just accelerated drinking for me. So that event and everything else, and the fact that I went to a occupation where drinking is completely accepted, and every boat is, I'm expected as the captain to drink with the boss every evening, and that's really yachting 101. So that for me was quitting drinking, and that was big for me. I did it socially and I did it for a lot of fun, and I never really felt like I had a drinking problem, but it never allowed me the clarity that I had missed in my life.
It's like losing years of your life then. How long did you, before you quit drinking, how many years did you?
Gosh, probably 20, something like that.
Yeah. So yeah.
But it was such an occupation thing.
Oh, I know. I'm from that generation too. So it's amazing how much of all of that's, part of the ritual and tradition.
Yeah. And if you work on a yacht and you don't know how to make a martini, you're just useless. That's forget it, and if you don't understand how to pair wines with food and all the rest of it, that's really what your job is.
Wow.
So quitting drinking was probably the best experience I've had in a long time. And my wife and I did it together, and we just said, okay, enough is enough. And let's just see if we can do this for 6 months. And I believe that was 6 years ago. So,
that's so cool. What a great story.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
That's such a great story, and especially to do it together.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very cool.
You would think it would be very difficult to do it both at the same time because you're both kind of miserable in the beginning, but I think it was also really helpful because we became our best cheerleaders,
Well, so. and nobody else had that around the house when you didn't want to be seeing it. Not that it sounds like you really truly had the addiction, but still, if somebody's got that sitting around and they're having a glass of wine or something, it's definitely more tempting. Well, we as a species have been programmed to assume that someone outside of ourselves will rise to meet the challenges of this world. This sentence reconciles us with the allowance and obligation of embodying our pure, divine, creative essence to birth a new paradigm reality of heaven on earth. Within your comfort zone, can you identify an example of an embodied limiting belief system that has or had programmed you to forego your personal power to another at some point in your life? Actually, just the story you shared that was part of the yacht life really fits the answer to that question. I'm sure there's more that you can add, but you were really nudged right into a role that created a different persona than who you are, just to be able to do the job. How many times do people do that just to be able to hold a job?
Sure. Yeah. That question really makes me think of a story that is on a different level about drinking than drinking. And that's when you work for billionaires, you meet all kinds of people. And you can only imagine the good, the bad, and the ugly of the wealthiest people on the planet. You can't imagine the wealth that most of the people that I've worked for have.
Wow.
And they're not really good at hearing the word no. They have a level of opulence, but also in a negative way, a life that is so miserable.
Yeah.
Anybody that thinks they want to become a billionaire has never met one or lived with one, because their time is seconds, not minutes or hours.
Yeah. Yes.
And they are under the gun or microscope or in front of the media or constantly in a level of distrust of everyone around them. And as you can imagine, you become family with these people. I live and work on a boat even if it's 200 feet, 300 feet, it's not very big. Yeah. You're 24 hours a day with them and their family and their kids, and you become family. Well, not to get too deep into that, but some of the families that I worked with because my background was so spotless. And most people who get into yachting or boating don't have a spotless resume. And I don't mean resume like I'd never been arrested. I'd never been, drug charges. I never, I was really lily white, and so the big families that you can only imagine, who I'm talking about, who have big connections to corporations. Once you get trusted within that group or that group of people, they share you around with their families, and they allow you into their sphere, if you will. So addressing the question, there's a lot that they trust you with, knowledge and information about them and their doings in the business world and the financial world, but also with their kids. But what I really noticed was their belief of authority and you and I's belief of authority is night and day different. And that's really what I like to teach people, is because you and I believe that there's a power controlling us in particular in a rules law-based system. Oh, well, the economic powers that be control who we are, and it's their doing that I'm poor. And that's a really difficult one for me to express to people, because when I do, I just lose the crowd, because they just, oh, well, yeah, it's real easy for you, Allan. You happy-go-lucky guy, and you've had this great life. I'm not wealthy. Mm-hmm. I'm not a wealthy man in monetary sense. I'm a man who knows that those people, and I'm going to say this bluntly, are too stupid to control my life.
Yay.
They're just simply not. They're not connected enough. They're not connected to who they are. Mm-hmm. on a spiritual level enough to rule the world. And that's what I gained. And a lot of people, in particular YouTube, and you can go out there and you go, oh, it's these group and that group of people are controlling everything. I'm not trying to say that they don't try, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. But the well-being that I speak of a lot and the consciousness of man is so massive that they have no chance of controlling it. And they know that. I heard them, I've had this exact discussion with people, a man who I'm just going to say either ran or was very high in the CIA, and they know this. They know the power and the strength of you and I.
Yay, I'm glad to hear they do know that and recognize it.
And because of this, they control us through the media and through regulations and laws and tax forms. And they keep us in this herd that we think is the law and the rule. But they play outside of it so much that they don't even know what the law and rule is. And they're like, they look at us like, oh, I can't even believe they listen to us. They're still mystified, or they're beyond understanding why we would listen to the system, or why all of that, changes who we are. You and I are such conformists in our daily lives because of the upbringing in which we had of this school system, which, thank God, I daydreamed my way through.
It's so funny because I did too. And until you brought that up, I'm like, wow, I think I did that a whole lot too. That's so funny. Yeah. It saved our lives.
It did. And I talk to scholars about this all the time, and they just look at me like, oh no, I'm a university professor and I know this. And I'm like, you are completely lost in your math and your science of who you believe the world is. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Good for him. We need everybody, right? We do. But for some reason, our whole system in society thinks that the way the people, the powers that be, if you will, have controlled school systems and the system, and to some degree, all of the systems, the military and hospitals and the medical system, all of it controlled from the top into this level of what I like to call just simple brainwashing.
The grand illusion. It's
grand illusion.
You have to give them an A for effort, because as far as the theater production they've done, they're doing a darn good job. And that's what it's going to keep coming through with our interview today. It's so pertinent that you're sharing all this, because it's exactly what I'm bringing through here.
And they aren't in control of you or the situation. Mm-hmm. They are blown away when the moves they make at the Federal Reserve and whatnot that actually work. They're like, oh my God, that worked. Like, I can't even believe that. I'm not kidding you about that. This is stuff that I study all the time, and I do it with laughter. I just look at these rulings and whatnot. That's why I don't watch television. I haven't watched television in 15 years, and I don't believe in any of it.
Well, it's interesting too, because when I look at this too, is that, and I know you have an understanding of energy. If we don't see ourselves as these bodies that we're in, and we actually see ourselves as energy, I think there are just so many humans on this earth that are not even in their bodies. Their energy is like standing right next to them through things such as what you experienced, where they literally, from their trauma and grief, got knocked out of their bodies, and they have no clue that their energy is standing right next to them, but hasn't ever reintegrated back into their bodies. And the way that you know it is because you start to feel your bodies in a totally different way. You start to understand it's speaking to you, and don't just see it as a pain body or something like that.
So well put. That's our biggest asset, is everything they've told us isn't real. It's so simple when you really understand it to the level that I finally waking me to over the last 50 years of this. Our biggest strength, they do. This is such a great point that you just brought up. That the teachings of Christ, okay, when he came to this planet, his basic principle was judgment. Okay, when you understand that what you and I do is listen to the system tell us we're supposed to judge everything.
Yes.
You're supposed to weigh the pros and cons of everything. And the more you weigh the pros and cons of virtually everything on the face of this planet, the more distracted you become. Mm-hmm. Because you're not now listening. You're not now within yourself. Mm-hmm. You are now outside of yourself.
Yeah.
One of my favorite little statements is the sweet spot in life is that spot in between being right and wrong. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty. The beauty is the boy who daydreamed.
Yeah.
Not getting something right or wrong, or those people are wrong because of this, and I'm going to stand on these morals. This is what they've taught us in our schools. Oh, Johnny got it wrong and Sally got it right from birth. And who we really are is up the middle. You are who you are. And the beauty of this great universe in which we live in is your individualism. Who you are cannot be duplicated in any other manner. It just can't be. I use the analogy of two identical twins can walk down the street and have two totally different experiences in life. And it's such a beautiful thing when you get that. And I call that my first principle. Like everything I hear, I step back and I go, well, somebody's wanting me to judge that last statement. Where's the judgment? Okay, let me just find peace in both sides as best I can.
Right.
And I know everybody and their brother now is thinking to themselves, oh, well, that guy's just milquetoast. He's got his head in the sand. He's not listening to all the stuff I'm listening to. Because if he knew all these things, he would take a stand and get a gun and go shoot somebody. Well, that's their exact.
My introduction about you, where I said that you live in the present moment, not the past or the future. You're totally playing out by your answers right now what I said about your introduction.
My son wrote that, by the way.
Did he? Oh, that's cool.
He's a great writer. Yeah, I could have never come up with any of that.
I'd love it. So recognizing that we choose the stories we live, which is really what you're portraying with what you're sharing, that we choose the stories we live from can be liberating. One of the stories that prevail at times for us and sometimes for too long of our lifetime can be the story that you've also portrayed of business as usual. In this business as usual storyline, Macy states business as usual shows up for us as outdated identity structures and circular, repetitive, non-emergent processes that go round and round and round like a hamster wheel. In this stagnant reality, the defining assumption is there is little need to change the way we live. It is a helpful reminder to realize that whatever situation we encounter, we can choose our response. What are your thoughts on this last sentence, Allan?
Of course we can. Of course we can. It's such a hard thing to teach somebody else. You have to find it for yourself. I know that's a cop-out, but if you can't feel it within, you're not going to retain it for the next time it occurs in your day. Mm-hmm. But the beauty of thinking from now, living in the moment, okay, and thinking of yesterday is really so senseless. But if you can try and find out what you want to occur in your life or where you would love your life to be, let's say thinking in the future, if you will, just focus upon what you want. So much of our time is focused upon what we don't want in our lives. And I don't understand that. That's that loop that you're talking about, that we get stuck in this. It's this, like being in a revolving door that you can't get out of is, and then next thing you know, you're 80 years old and you're in hospice and you're wondering what happened to the time. Where did it all go? And why didn't I do more? What was my life supposed to become? I don't feel like I achieved anything. That's that revolving door. And it comes from, again, I'm not trying to blame the system, but it really comes from being told that you are not great. You are not everything that you can possibly daydream your life to be.
Yeah.
You are that. We are that. And it doesn't matter, and I'm going to use this word incorrectly, but it doesn't matter how insignificant you think your life is. Mm-hmm. Oh, to the whole, to the forward thinking and expansion of this universe, your little thought of your minuscule life is so important to the future of consciousness that you have no concept of that. Because you've told you, if you're not an actor, a doctor, a lawyer, that you're just not somebody. But you are, because, getting back to what the system has told us through media and other things, you're not significant because the math and science says you're just this body. Mm-hmm. No, you're not. 99% of who you really are is that spirit, that light, that energy within all of us is eternal. And I'm just going to put that out there. Trust me, I came from a very big Christian background to where in the word eternal was forbidden.
Wow.
But let me tell you, that has not been my experience from many times since. In the living of my life, I know we live many, many lives and have lived many lives with many more to go. And it's a beautiful thing. And it doesn't matter how small you think you are as relevant and as important. And you can be a brighter beacon of light in this planet than you are currently being if you can get out of that spinning doorway. Mm-hmm. And that is thinking better of where mankind can be, where more what we can all do, what we all do together. Those thoughts of a better world tomorrow is what they're trying to keep you from having.
Which is part of this question, which is really that we can choose the stories we live from, and knowing that I even do it in my dreams. If I have a nightmare, I'm in the nightmare and I rewrite it. It's like, no, I'm not doing this in this dream. This isn't interrupting my sleep like this. We're changing this one to be a positive outcome on this dream.
So good. So good. And that's a learned skill, right? Like when you can get to that point where you can actually stop in the middle of a conversation, gossip, right? You're in a room and you walk into a room and they're gossiping about another person and it's somebody that you actually appreciate or you like. You have two choices. You can join in and start bagging on the person, or you can simply step back and say, I like this about that person. You know what I like about that person is I like this and I like that. And I really respect them for this. And it will change the conversation. But 90% of the time we don't stop and take that gracious step of a better day and a better thought going forward.
Which comes back to this business as usual. So then the next thing that Macy talks about in that book is unraveling. She calls this another reality that comes after. And it shows up after the business as usual reality, in which progressive decline, countless collapses of interlocking elements, climbing levels of discordant emotions, and falling levels of trust rear up fervently, which is where I think our world is now in many ways. It feels as though one's world is being dismantled which, in discussing your divorce, that fit that too. We may attempt to return to business as usual, but unfortunately, it only speeds up the unraveling. Can you recall an important time in your life or in a relationship where your business as usual reality began to unravel?
Yeah, there's been a few, obviously, that I reflect back on, but I'll never forget a time when I had what I thought was the dream job, and my life was so good and so perfect, and everything was going great, and I was making more money than I ever expected, and had more freedom in my job than I'd ever had before, and everything was going so great, and then we got fired, and I was like, through no fault of my own, we all got fired. There was 16 of us.
Wow.
And they fired the whole crew. And I can remember thinking to myself, the selfish little SOB that got caught smoking weed, by the boss, ruined all of our jobs. And I'll never forget it, because it was one of those things that it was like, I wasn't the captain. I was second in charge of the boat. But I went to the captain and begged him. I said, why don't we just all agree to pee in a bottle? I mean, he's on drugs. I'm not. Why do I have to lose my job? I didn't understand. He was the lowest person on the staff.
Wow.
And fired everybody. And I can remember just hating, here I am. We're in the Caribbean, right? And I'm in the Caribbean, and I just lost my favorite boat, my favorite job. Oh. That was going to be the feather in my cap that was going to allow me to run any boat I wanted. I was going to have my choice to go anywhere in the world, to take any job.
Wow.
We're going to be huge on my resume. All those things that we think about in business life, and wasn't meant to be. But the happy ending of it is the very next vessel, we flew us all back to Florida, and the very next boat I took was probably the most significant boat and time in my life that I've ever had. So as far as career goes. So when you say to yourself, it can't get any worse than this, or, I can't believe that some other clown ruined my life, just think that's probably a big turning point for you. It really is.
It's so neat to be able to. I remember when I went through my divorce and said, I can't wait till it's 3 years from now. And exactly at the 3-year mark, I'm like, I was right. This is totally so much better now. It's all okay. Yeah. But man, when you're in it, it's your face is smashed up against the windshield, and you truly can't see through that windshield when it first hits, that shock of the grief, really.
I also told you that story when we first met. That's kind of cool too, but it's quite lengthy. So I don't know if you want me to tell it.
It's totally fine. Totally fine.
There was a real low moment also in my life that my wife and I, right after I came to the realization that I didn't want to be part-time daddy, I was like, miserable, completely miserable, and alcohol wasn't helping. And, I thought to myself, I just can't, I got to fix this somehow. And I walked into a laundromat on the 4th of July, because everybody does that on the you're clearly down and out. You're clearly down and out if you're doing your laundry while the parade is going on. But, so I was like, okay, well, I know nobody will be in there. It won't be crowded, right? So I went in, and there was this lady, and I walked right by her, and she blurted out something, and I thought, well, I don't know, well, that's weird. There was only 2 of us in there, and so mountain town, so nobody dresses really nice, if you know what I mean. Everybody has boots and jeans on, and she was dressed to the nines, and I thought, wow, that's, what is she? Who is she? That was kind of weird. So I'm loading up my laundry, and I started to walk back, and she just stood up in front of me and said, do you believe in, she stopped. She said, never mind. I already know you do. I read people's lives, and I'm reading you like a movie. Do you believe in that? You believe in that kind of stuff, right? I was like, well, yeah, of course. She goes, could I talk to you for a while? Needless to say, I think it was 4 to 5 hours later, literally, we went to dinner together. She told me my entire life.
Wow.
And I said, there's no way. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that either. And I'm not doing any of it. Everything she said,
Wow.
except for 2, has completely been my life since that day.
Wow.
And it wasn't one of those things where I wrote it all down. It wasn't until it happened until I would be like, oh my God. You know, I lived in my dream town. Like I told you guys, I love the nature. When I backpack, I go alone. I go for 2 weeks at a time by myself.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's so.
Yay.
Trust me.
Yay for you and yay for nature.
Yeah, it's the best. So I moved to a backpack ski resort town, and when I was still in high school, and pretty much grew up there as a man, you know, and I worshipped that town, loved it. Nobody was ever going to take me out of there. And she goes, oh, no, you're going to be on big, giant white boats, and you're going to be able to see the crystal clear bottom of the ocean.
Wow.
And I just see blue ocean all around you in big white boats. And I was just about to become a Olympic ski team coach.
Wow.
So it was a massive move from where I was. I wasn't about to be it. I was offered the position, but it didn't pay anything. Most mountain jobs don't, you know. But so I was like, wow, this is going to be big for me, you know. Okay. So I didn't believe that first part. And I had the craziest thing happen to me. My summer job is fly fishing guide, and my winter job is teaching kids to ski and race. And I'm not going anywhere. This is the perfect life. And, you know, plus I didn't want to leave my son. And I'm sitting in a coffee shop, and this lady drives up in this beautiful car. And she says to me, I'd known her. She was a ski instructor. She said, hey, Allan, how you doing? I said, great. She goes, hey, you got time for a coffee? And we sat down for an hour, and she goes, I was hoping I'd run into you because I just think the perfect job for you is to be working on boats. And I was like, why would somebody say that to me? And I hadn't even thought about the experience that I had in the laundromat when she's telling me all this.
Wow.
And I was like going through this thing, and I was like, you know, I don't think so, Nat. You know, I appreciate it, Natalie, but no, that's not my gig. She said, well, here's my card, you know, think about it. I want to say a year or 2 went by, and then it hit me. I was like, I had my dream job. They'd helped. I love to golf, right? When I was a kid, and they were building a golf course, and I was hired to help them build a golf course, which is like cool. A dream of mine.
Yeah, right? That'd be way fun.
Way in the mountains.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, way cool. Yeah. And by the way, I got to work on it the whole summer. We had bears make dens out of the sand traps, and
you're hitting on a lot of my fantasies here.
Right. Mine too. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And she calls me out of the blue and says, we need you immediately. And I was like, what, Matt, what are you talking about? She goes, we need crew, and we want you. And John knew who you were, and you know, we need you. And I was like, I can't get there. I'm sorry. Too bad. I can't make it. She planted that seed. And the following morning I woke up and I said, I'm going to start putting money aside just so if she calls again, I'm going to get on a plane and go. Well, about 9 months later, this is a year and a half later, I actually flew to Fort Lauderdale. and turned my back on the mountains, my son,
Wow.
and the whole thing, and became a yacht captain.
So what did it feel like? Was it an excitingness, but also I mean, were you in the present moment with it? Where were your feelings with something like that?
I was so torn,
Yeah, so you were in that bridge.
Yeah, it was truly, and it was. I didn't want to go, but it was such a calling that I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't. And but the neat thing about the lady, I got to follow back on the story. There's so many other stories I could tell about that day, as you can imagine. But so I was having, before I left town, I had my ex-wife cut my hair because she was a hairstylist, and we kind of settled some things out and whatnot. And we were kind of okay with each other, and she used to cut my hair. And I started telling her the story about the psychic that I'd met. And she goes, "Wow, did you give her her number?" And I was like, "Yeah, she did. It's in my wallet, And so I opened my wallet up and I show it to her, and her name's written on it. She wrote it all out. I didn't write it out. She did. And she's looking at the phone number and goes, "There's not enough digits here." And I thought, "What are you talking about?" And I'd never read it before. I never called her back, And she goes, there's not enough digits here to call anybody, Allan. And why would she do that? She's really smart and well dressed. And I'm like, "I don't know. That's kind of weird." She goes, "Do you think she even existed?" So this is the best part of the whole story, right?
This is great.
The dinner that I took her to dinner. And the name of the restaurant was called Angels. And I didn't really put any of this together, honestly, until years later.
Great.
I went to a restaurant called Angels.
That's exactly what I thought as you told that story. Oh my God.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, did any of that really even happen? I should backtrack, but it's such a long story. I don't really want to backtrack, but my life leading up to that point was I had lived, my wife that we had separated, her mother was a scribe. And
so explain for the audience what a scribe is.
Well, back in the 80s, automatic writing, I guess is what we call it today. She became a big part of my life when I was 20 years old. And she would sit down and we would ask her a question.
Cool.
And she would just, her hand would just move so fast and you could barely even read it. But it was interesting the way it was all written in biblical terms. Thou and thy and all of this.
Cool.
And so I lived with that for over a decade. Probably once a month or more, we would all sit down around the table and just come up with questions.
That's so fun. That's so cool.
You can just imagine. I mean, we asked between, her husband, my wife and I, every question you can imagine.
Great.
And the one thing that I have to say about all of that is she wasn't really big with predictions, but everything she ever said came true.
Wow.
And she was the one that explained to me, or the writings explained to me when I was a very young man. You have to remember, I got married at 20, and she was so instrumental in me understanding who I was in that near-death experience and the other lifetimes that had led up to this lifetime that we could ask about, and the many different lives that I'd had. That it was so interesting because she used to always tell us, this person and I were madly in love for 13 years. And we created my son is just an incredible man. There was no way we were going to get divorced. And she always said, "Oh, you guys aren't going to make it." And I thought that was always so, she got that one wrong,
Wow.
But and her husband was a healer. I know this all kind of sounds a lot.
No, this sounds, I mean, well, it's right up my alley. So for me, anyway,
the day I met him was he had healed me on a lakeside. I was a ski racer when I was a younger man, and I'd had a bad accident. And he had laid his hands, but I'll give you the real short Reader's Digest version. I'd never met the man before. I wasn't necessarily at that point in my life a spiritual man in any manner. Like I said, I'd had the near-death experience, but I was just more of a daydreamer than I was anything else. But I'd never had anybody teach me about religion or Christianity or Christ or any spiritual, real. My family weren't those people. So when I was on the side of the lake and literally a mess, the whole right side of my body was a disaster.
Wow.
And he laid his hands on me. And, the short version is the following morning, I was perfectly fine.
Wow.
Bones that were broken were no longer broke.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were being prepped for a much bigger role that I hope is now coming forward for you. So in these current times, what are you turning towards because you know it aligns more strongly with your values and hopes for the future? So you are or were willing to replace that limiting belief that can keep you within the business as usual mode with the truth of just how important and capable you are.
Wow. How am I coming to terms with it? I'm living now as a older, one would like to think wiser. I don't prove that hourly.
That's okay. I love the word elder, so I think it has a great reference, and there's a desire for great respect for elders in our world that's missing. So
yeah, for a lot of good reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm twice the man.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I've been exposed, as the stories have told, and there's a million other stories along those lines. You can tell that I have had things that have occurred in my life that I can't denounce. I can't deny.
Right.
So there's no way for me to say, oh, well, that doesn't exist. So for me, it's so much easier to walk in these energies in the light of God and universe, source, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's very unknowing. And I know the incredible strength of us all, because other stories that I probably won't have time to tell, I've seen the love and the passion of God's love through in a physical manner directly to me in a way that I can't really put into words. So it's really difficult for me. I keep stumbling on that one, but it's a knowing of who we all are. Mm-hmm. I'm not reading a book or listening to another person's experience. In fact, my family will tell you that I don't read much. And I'm not trying to say that there isn't a lot to be gained from reading. But for me, I'm receiving. Uh-huh. And my clarity is so much better when I just receive. Mm-hmm. And I run the risk of, when I listen to YouTube videos or other people speak or reading books, I've noticed in the last few years that I get like their opinion. And I don't know where they were at in their day, because I know that I'm not walking perfectly in the light every moment of my life. I think it's impossible to do. I really do.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they were standing in the moment that they wrote said sentence. So for me, it's not a judgment. It's just, I think I can do as well for my use case.
Perfect.
To go with what I'm receiving. And through meditation and other practices, I feel like I get more downloads, and I think they're clearer and they make more sense to Allan. They don't necessarily make sense to everybody. When I tell other people what I believe or what I think to be reality, they have very good arguments for why their experience or their spiritual path has been different, and they believe something different than I do. And I fully understand that there isn't just one way to this. That would be almost a limit, too limiting for our expansive universe.
Oh, for sure.
That isn't creativity, right? If we're all to believe one thing, that doesn't make sense. So I don't know if I answered the question.
You did. I mean, and again, it fits back to my intro again on you about being a master of resilience, or maybe your son wrote that, and resourcefulness. I mean, to me, what you're describing is how resourceful you have been with your path. You know, it's like paying attention and being present to the different messages and messengers and guides and support that continue to come forward for you. That's really a common denominator that it seems like you're sharing. It's really cool. It would be neat sometime to, if it came to you as a desire to make a timeline, it'll be actually really fascinating to witness how many different guides and teachers and support systems showed up for you at such integral times in your life, and your willingness to go ahead and heed the call, like when you went ahead and left. I mean, I can understand, because I used to live on the ocean, and now I'm living in the mountains, so I can absolutely identify with the different realities. And there's no way I would have ever guessed I could leave a beach. But same thing. Yeah. I mean, I just love nature so much. So luckily, there are those such as yourself who recognize there is a different way forward, which you're so beautifully articulating today, who focus on reinventing our approaches to life, developing systems and structures that reinvent the flourishing of life. Inner and outer capacities of change become embodied. Shifts in the overall sense of who we are, who we want to be, and how we relate to one another. And our living earth becomes guideposts. In the book Act of Hope, Macy refers to this third reality as the great turning point, when an apropos title, "What unlimited realities of heaven on earth have you created as you turn up with an intention to play your part," Allan?
Wow, what a wonderful question. I think one of my true advantages or gifts that's been bestowed upon me is my love for mankind.
Yay.
And my ability to express it to people. And I live in the energy of this universe now, and it's with me at all times. And that's a whole nother story. But I know who we all are. And I come from there first, and then I build out.
Neat.
And that's such a gift that's been given to me. We're all so blessed. We don't understand the greatness of us all. And I can't, it's so hard, because I talk with so many people who don't understand the beauty of who they are.
Right.
And how do I teach it? I have the patience of a million men. Mm-hmm. And I'm not ever eternally going to give up in knowing of how incredible we are.
Yay.
And how important that pure love and essence of all of us is our, I don't like the word savior, but it is the future of all mankind.
You know,
and it's so much more obvious today than it's ever been.
Yes, thank goodness.
You talk about that we're in that Pluto, and we're in the Aquarius movement of people knowing. They're not just reading it, like I mentioned before. They're not just reading about this; they're feeling it, and they know something big is happening, mm-hmm. and they're living it now. And like I mentioned, we can't live it at 24 hours a day. It's just so intense.
Oh, no. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we're not meant to. We're not meant to.
Mm-mm.
I'm not putting anyone down who meditates for 20 hours a day, but that I really don't believe that that's my mission, right? And so many people think, oh, well, that person's at a higher being than I am because they do, or somebody they would think I'm their guru or something because I've had more spiritual experiences. That is not what I'm teaching ever here. That's not what we are. You speak of an awakening. This awakening is happening, but it's been happening for a very, very long time. In my short lifetime, the expansion from when I first started telling stories about when I was healed to today, people that witnessed it did believe it back in 19. They didn't believe they were Catholic or whatever, oh my God, that's dark energy or whatever, everybody's got some place that they're at that they can explain it, in their mind. So it just makes sense so they can go on with their day. It's too late for that. Society is bigger than that now.
Yes.
And what's happening is, and I like to use the analogy of there's two paths. And it's not like you can't jump tracks and go to the other path anytime, because you can. Like we talk about, some, unforeseen event changes your path, your direction.
Like we talked about with the emergency, where you're completely taken away from your familiar, just like you did. Just that you've told the story so many. You've had some patterns of that for sure.
Dozens of times it's happened, and it's still happening to me.
Yes.
And because I'm accepting of the fact that change is beautiful, and we are changing. We're evolving as a consciousness on this universe. It's bigger than this planet, and we are, and we're becoming aware of it to a degree to where it's the answer. Everyone looks for the answer of life. The answer to life is the expansion of that consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's capable of all healing. It's capable of all knowledge. It's capable of receiving everything that you could dream or possibly create in 1,000 lifetimes. And the knowing of that for me has made a massive difference in the individual in which you see before you today.
Oh, it's laid down such a really beautiful divine foundation. I mean, that's the word that, or the picture image that comes forward, listening to everything that you've shared that's been so in depth, is just to really witness that this beautiful structure was your foundation and was laid way back when you were that little kid that started on that journey. And
I don't want it to make it sound like you have to have those things occur in your life for it to become you. No, that's not what I'm trying to share at all. I think it made me a better helper, or I don't like to call myself people call me a life coach.
I like the words compassionate witness.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that fits where you're not really bringing forward any advice or anything like that. You're just actually witnessing the authenticity of whatever someone's sharing in the moment as their story for that day.
Yeah. It's so it's all an individual thing, but I keep saying that, but the collective is so huge, and so transforming, that, like we mentioned earlier, the powers that be are completely outmatched. That's
why they're working so hard to keep us distracted with every Tom, Dick, and Harry scenario. And honest to goodness, it's like bringing pictures forward that are from 25 years ago and showing them as this is happening right now. And we're all like, oh my gosh, it's like, you guys, that's why they are laughing, like, oh my gosh, this one worked too.
Yeah. But it's so comical to me because it's all just exposure. And the more, like, I don't watch it. So when I hear about it, I just laugh out loud to people. And I said, well, how much of that do you actually believe? I'm like, well, what do you mean that happened, Allan? Don't you watch the news? This is a funny little story, and I don't mean to throw my sister under the bus, but she told me one day, she goes, well, how would you know what's going on in the world if you don't watch TV? And I completely insulted her and told her, well, that might be the stupidest thing I've ever heard a human being tell me.
You lost some brownie points on that one. So it's now time to look at how personal well-being, community well-being, and planetary well-being are associated with the way we view ourselves. The overzealous individualism that you're talking about of our culture is destructive to humanity, keeping us stagnant in the business as usual reality. It is now time, as you're sharing, to embody a larger story of who and what we are as a species. A system is a whole that is more than the sum of its parts. With the energy and commitment of your podcasts, what is your active hope to mobilize people to rise to their role in this great turning?
My hope is that I know this would change the world. My hope is we can find a way to teach children at the very beginning of life how incredible they are. And so that every child grows up knowing how important they are and how loved they are by Source, and how they are loved and not judged or criticized every moment of everything they think is important in the world. It is important. It doesn't matter if you agree with what that person thinks is important. That's not the life they need to focus upon. That's not how they're going to grow going forward. What they deem to be their life experience should be appreciated, should be loved and nurtured. And if we can find it within ourselves to grow a government or a society or a neighborhood who believes in that simple principle, it wouldn't take a decade and we could change the face of this planet. And we can do that. And I'm not trying to say that the face of this planet is broken or wrong in the manner in which it is. What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of people that have to wait to our age to figure out how incredible and how brilliant we all are. And just imagine the world of the planet that we could create if everybody woke up liking themselves, let alone loving themselves. And this is something that, again, I'm not trying to blame anybody but Hollywood and media and the rest of it. I mean, in particular with the, like you say, the divine feminine, look what they go through. Look what they've gone through with all of it. The judgment of their beauty from the moment they're born is just, it's a level of ignorance. It doesn't come from wisdom. It doesn't come from divine energy. It comes from a darker area, if you will. And we can fix that through love and compassion. And compassion is everything that's all we need. We don't need tools. We don't need funding. We don't need the rest of it. We have those tools built within us.
Well, I've had somebody that I studied with related to the Sophia Code, and she teaches that there's an entire universe of kindness within us, a universe of kindness within us, a universe of love within us, a universe of peace within us. And it's almost like with what you're talking about with allowing the downloads and allowing the formless to become form, we can just, surrender, if that's the right word, or open up to that peace. Peace will just be there for us at all times. It doesn't go away. It's not gone ever. It's always there, and it's always supporting us. And like you're saying to do with the children, it's allowing that aspect of ourselves to be unpeaceful till we want to get back to the fact that we always are peace. I mean, it's just so cool when you look at the simplicity of the bigger picture of it all. I mean, it's kind of a dichotomy.
They keep trying to convince us of our differences.
Yeah.
And they try to teach us that, we can blow the planet up and we can destroy this whole divine thing. No, we can't do that.
And what, to me, it really is like the alcoholism. It's just insatiability, because when you get immersed in the destruction and can't find your way back to the light or the source or God or Allah or whatever you choose to support, that you become insatiable into just take everybody down with you with your destructiveness, because you have no clue how to find your way back out. I mean, because I've been exposed to a lot of really elite people myself, and I had a really incorrect and illusionary form of what success was, and always told myself I was fearful of success because what I witnessed with them. I loved their genius. I was definitely addicted to their genius, but at the same time, they were absolutely the most destructive people I've ever met in my whole life, most especially towards children. So, yeah.
That's a sticky topic, that one. But we need to remember the poor are abusive to children as well.
I know. So, I agree. I totally agree.
It's not a one shoe fits all.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you for bringing that in.
I know what you mean. It's we have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And the answers are spreading and they're sharing. And the answer really, it doesn't come from words, as you know. This is energy, and this energy won't be stopped.
I agree.
This is not something like you can incarcerate anybody you would choose.
Mm-hmm.
But, how'd that work out with Gandhi, right? Like, that doesn't work. That's so 3D dimensional that's how their linear minds work.
Mm-hmm.
That you and I are so much beyond advanced than that industrial era that's behind us. And it's not our future. It's not where we're going. And where we are going is going to be better, because I can only see the growth of man's. It's everywhere.
We are master creators. Macy also shares the idea of being one with all life may seem abstract or like an advanced spiritual state attainable only after many years of meditation. You talked about this too. Yet when we are moved to tears by whichever wounds of our world hurt us most, we directly experience our interconnectedness with the living earth. We can look at the pain in the world with a common denominator at play, that of being one with all life.
Yes is what I have to say about that.
I think that's a great response. All right. So our next one is Macy describes distributed intelligence when we as humans choose to coordinate our actions through a collective thinking process. She states that no one part must have the whole answer. Rather, the intelligence of the whole emerges through its actions and interactions of its parts. She refers to this as connecting consciousness, the expansion of a central organizing established order of priority, creating a new storyline which embodies the spirit of compassion.
Love it. So well put. Let me talk about something that triggered something in me right there.
Okay.
She as you know, well, I think I've mentioned to you, my son and I do energy work with people, just word of mouth. We don't do much else other than that. But in that energy, there is a connection, and we call it reconnected. Okay. The being that so many of us, that we get busy in our day and we forget how important we are on a spiritual level. Well, sometimes if somebody comes up to you with high energy and with positive thoughts of emotion towards your being, your specific energy, you can actually help somebody dust off the connections, if you will. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's not, mind altering or anything like that, but the experiences my son have had in working with these energies and working with people has been amazing, miraculous at times. And I think that's kind of what I got from that statement. It was such a beautiful statement. I hope I didn't ruin it. But it's the wisdom of, we are able to use divine energy, if you will, universal energy, to help gain more belief of well-being of yourself. It's a connecting of, I don't want to get too technical, but your DNA and the energy within you is all electricity. We know this. Quantum physics is teaching us all of this. Isn't it so interesting that in our short lifetimes, that scientists have gone from this part where they're like, well, it's about this particle and this particle. And now they've come to the point where, no, it's actually the energy between the two. They've gone the 180 that we've been trying to tell them. No, it's the energy. It's not the particle, right?
Right.
Which is kind of really what I've been talking about. It's not the math and the science. It's the energy. And it's the power of your prayer and your conscious desire and your daydreams are powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. And once you get that, you understand why you're here.
Yes.
You're here because this is an imaginary planet in which you are free to have all those tactile experiences of the molding of whatever it is, or the building of whatever you're physically building. But it's teaching us that, how did you come up with the idea to make it? You got that through a cooperation with Source and all that's ever been.
Yay.
All that's ever been eternally. That is coming through you. And it's allowed you to come up with this. Einstein has a great idea. Mm-hmm. Well, isn't it interesting that it's always right after his nap? Tesla, the same way.
Right, that's interesting. I've never heard that.
Oh, yeah. In fact, Tesla, whenever he was stumped, he would say, oh, I'm just going to go lay down for a bit. And he would wake up and he goes, the first thought on my mind was always the best. Like you talk about when you wake up in the morning.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if you've heard this about Tesla. This is one of my favorite stories about the man. I really think he was so gifted and so connected to.
Oh, I agree.
He wasn't a scientist. He was a spiritual man. There's a big difference. He was both, if you will. One of my favorite stories is he used to walk around the streets of New York talking to himself. And everybody like, he's a madman. The guy is out of his mind. Well, some people who were on a more higher spiritual level were, well, he's speaking in tongues, or he's speaking, this gibberish actually means something. Maybe we should write it down and keep track of it. But that's not actually, when they found his journals, exactly what he was doing. See, he'd put together that conscious thought is universal. I don't know if you've heard this story.
No, I haven't.
But he had friends in Amsterdam that he was talking to, and he was writing down the date and the time in which he was talking in New York, and they were mailing him letters of what they received that he said out loud, thousands of miles away.
So it was telepathy. Was it telepathy then? Yeah.
Telepathy, and that we're all connected. Wow. And he proved it to himself. And as the system goes, his documents and many of those teachings or diaries were confiscated, as we know, and which is a lot of the reason why I studied the Bible for many years, and The biggest problem I have with the Bible is all the stories that were left out.
Right. As far as I understand, we're still going to have them come through. So is there any last thing you want to share before we go into our closing?
Boy, no, I think I've said enough because I'm a man of words, but what I try to do when I go into interviews and when I do my YouTube channel is I try this at home. Simply sit down, take some time for yourself, meditate if you do, relax, find a quiet place, and say to yourself, I want the words to come to me. I want the knowledge of the wisdom of the many generations before me, our guides, if you will, the angels, if you will, come to me, and may my words resonate, not just the words, the energy in which is being portrayed through this being or this vibration forward to you. And that's I try to do that before every video that I can. Yeah. And I hope that you have felt that sensation. Oh. That my son and I actually help people understand. And we try not to be too forceful with it because people need to find everything at their own pace and their own way. So and
it's just planting that seed. So as you've so artfully and diplomatically personified, we don't have to wait until our trauma and grief are cleared to do our work in the world. There is something to the premise that with love, all things are possible. With mindfulness, discipline, and devotion, you may come to realize that your spiritual compassion is not outside of you, but dwells eternally inside your consciousness, ready and willing to embrace emergence through moral and physical courage, living one's life as an example of what life will one day become, and becoming an expression of that beauty in form, exemplifies the insightfulness of the radical interconnectedness of all things, dancing the interplay between compassion and insight. Like Allan demonstrates, are you ready to enable over time for trauma and grief to be your gift of something greater? That's a beautiful interview. Thank you ever so much. I just feel ecstatic and at the same time serene with everything that you intuitively through your beautiful preparation beforehand articulated today. I felt it really deep in my heart, and I feel blessed that you and I have connected and crossed paths, and am grateful for all of those listeners. May they gain whatever they need to gain in the moment from everything that's been shared today. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. I think what you do and the work you do is priceless to the future of all of us. And this format and many like yours allows us all to share that there is so many beautiful answers out there, not just one. There's so many of us that really care about everybody and everybody listening to this. People have your back. People care about you spiritually. And it's so important to share because we get caught up in our lives and we don't tell each other how much we love each other.
Right.
There's not a show I end every show, and I mean it from my heart. I love you all.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm not afraid to tell anyone that, you know. So it's so beautiful, and thank you so much, Annie.
You're welcome. Hear ye to us being masters of creation, because that's in the end what we truly are. So it's been a blessing. Thank you so much. And I look forward to connecting with you in many different ways going forward. Thank you so much, Allan.
Annie, it was my pleasure. And anytime I would love to be on your show for any reason. Great. And I would love to get you on my show as well going forward. So it's been a great experience. Thank you so much.